And welcome back to the NWA 1983 project. I'm your host, Lex G, and with me, as always, is Matt Riley. How you doing tonight, Matt?
Playing her.
All right. Knee injuries are the worst. Very happy I don't have one. So tonight's episode would be a large closed-circuit event emanating from the Tokyo Dome. This will be All Japan Pro Wrestling, the Super Spectacular. This will be our first NWA event over in Japan. It will be hosted by All Japan Pro Wrestling. And for the first time probably ever up to this point, you will see New Japan Pro Wrestling wrestlers on an All Japan show. Now that's fairly commonplace nowadays, but back in the day, you would probably get killed if you did that. So tearing down barriers is what I'm about in the 1983 project, tearing down barriers. So it's really cool stuff. Tonight on the program, you will see the following matches. You have Riki Steamboat versus the Dynamite Kid, Riki Choshu versus Dan Hasen, Macho Man Randy Savage taking on Tiger Mask, Dory and Terry Funk taking on the Briscoe brothers, Antonio Inoki versus Tenryu, Bruiser Brody versus Abdullah the Butcher. And in the main event, you have Harley Race taking on the Giant Baba for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. So I think that would be a huge drawing event. Again, seeing Inoki and Riki Choshu on a All Japan show would have been quite the novelty back in 1983. Quite the probably impossibility in 1983. But who knows? And if I could work out that deal, I would earn my spot as the NWA president. There you go. So All Japan Pro Wrestling is what we're going to talk about. All Japan Wrestling was formed in 1972 when Giant Baba split away from the Japanese Wrestling Association. That was his home for the longest time, a couple of years after Riki Dozen had passed away. When the JWA folded the following year, even more wrestlers joined All Japan. Now, originally I had thought that Japanese Wrestling Association evolved to All Japan, but that's not the case. There were two separate entities. During that same time frame is when Inoki split off and he formed New Japan Pro Wrestling. So, no, it was actually two different promotions, and then JWA had folded, and then basically they got a lot of their wrestlers. Most importantly, they got their TV. So they got Nippon TV, which is, I guess, the big channel over in Japan. All Japan Pro Wrestling at the time was probably the bigger of the two promotions. That could be argued, I guess, but All Japan had the backing of the NWA, where New Japan didn't. Now, New Japan didn't go on and make a deal with the WWF, I believe in the late 70s and early 80s. That's why you saw like Inoki on MSG shows and lots of title exchanges between the WWF and New Japan, where Baba had the NWA wrestlers. So you saw a lot of Kerry Von Erich over there. You saw a lot of Ric Flair, Harley Race, the Briscoes, Funks over there. It was super important. And then they had the NWA International Heavyweight Championship, which was the precursor of their championship, was the PWF, the Pacific Wrestling Federation Heavyweight Championship. They never really had an All Japan belt. All Japan was the promotion, but the PWF was the governing body. I think their first president was Lord James Blears from AWA fame.
Yeah. Lord James Blears. Oh, man.
Yeah. Their big event was the Championship Carnival, their yearly round-robin tournament, which was huge. They didn't have one in 83, by the way. Basically, they got all the best heavyweights from All Japan, and they wrestled in a round-robin tournament, which is big in Japan. Like their big thing was the round-robin tournaments. A couple interesting things that went on in All Japan was Giant Baba winning the NWA Championship. First from Jack Briscoe, as the legend claims that Baba had paid these guys $10,000 to drop the belt to him, and then they would win it on the way out.
Right.
So basically, Jack Briscoe would come in, lose the belt to Baba. Baba would have it for a week or two, and then right before they leave, Baba would drop it back. He did the same thing with Harley Race as well. I think twice. Which brings up something interesting. So say, for example, Baba beats Race in Japan for the belt.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I was the president of the NWA at the time, I would have had Baba come back with the belt. And you can build, Giant Baba from Japan, this mysterious character, the mystery of Japanese professional wrestling. Again, he's, 6'8", 6'9", I guess. Has that giant disease, looks like a monster. Would have brought him here as a heel, put Gary Hart as his manager. Mm-hmm. And I would have had him wrestle, like, a couple of guys, and then he would drop the belt to an emerging star. Maybe he would drop the belt to a David Von Erich, a Ted DiBiase, a Ric Flair. they got the rub of beating this monster that destroyed Harley Race. I don't know how much Harley would have liked that, but I think it would have worked in terms of stories. I think you could have got some big houses out of Baba in the United States. Especially no one really knows him, no one really saw him. They go see this giant Japanese guy that looks like a monster. So I think that could have been really, really good. So one of the interesting things about All Japan was their bookers. Their bookers were Dory Funk Sr., Terry Funk, and Dory Funk was their bookers. Now, rumor has it that they were going to go with either the Funks or the McMahons as their bookers. They went with the Funks. The Funks were they're credited. They're often credited to being the first people to have foreigner versus foreigner matches and Japanese versus Japanese matches in Japan. Prior to that, from what I understand, it was all Japanese versus American, and all the Americans that come over were heels anyway.
Right.
But Dory and Terry were like, no, we're going to have some babyface Gaijin wrestlers. So that's one of the reasons why the Funks are basically considered native Japanese in Japan. So that's why they're so huge over there. I mean, they were like the biggest box office attraction in the late 70s. Another interesting thing is Bruno Sammartino, who worked exclusively for All Japan, even though the WWF had a contract and a working relationship with New Japan. As the story goes, Bruno was over in Japan early on, and during the Japanese Pro Wrestling Alliance days, and Inoki tried to shoot on him during a match and try to double cross him. It didn't work with Bruno. Bruno, being ginormous at the time, was like, no, that's not happening. Bruno was able to take care of himself, so he never went to work for fucking Inoki. So that's why you never saw Bruno over in New Japan.
Wow.
Yeah, big deal. So again, their original heyday was probably up until like '83. They started at that point probably started to go down a little bit, especially with the NWA kind of falling apart in the mid '80s. They did go over to the AWA. That's why you saw like Jumbo Shiruda. He won the AWA title.
Jumbo Shiruda.
And I think Masa Saito also won the AWA championship. So it's kind of important for them. So by 1990, we had what they claim is what they call the first exodus. So you had Tenryu, who was one of their big stars during the '80s. Took a bunch of the wrestlers and formed his own wrestling promotion called Super World of Sports. So basically, Tenryu took Kabuki, Kichihara, Orihara, and Yatsu, and a couple other guys, formed his own promotion, which at that point, Baba had to push new stars, so that's where you got your Misawas, your Kawadas, and Kabashi. The funny thing about Super World of Sports, they had a working relationship with the WWF. And if you go back and watch your WrestleMania 7, you see Tenryu and Katao versus Demolition. And they beat the piss out of Demolition. And I think it's the first time that you saw a male wrestler give another male wrestler a powerbomb was in 1991 at the WrestleMania 7 in the WWF. The first time you saw a powerbomb in the WWF, it would be, I think, Leilani Kai giving it to one of the Jumping Bomb Angels. Like 87. So at that point, to the mid-90s, when I go back and watch All Japan, it's the mid-90s. That's when you had your Misawas and Kawada and Kenta Kabata. You had your Dr. Death Steve Williams and your Terry Gordys. And those guys really kind of turned on the house. And those matches are some of the best matches I've ever seen in my entire life. They're fantastic. So, guys, if you ever you get an opportunity to watch those Misawa versus Kabashi matches, I recommend that wholeheartedly because they're awesome. They're so good. That's where a young Johnny Ace gained his popularity. They innovated the Ace Crusher, which is Diamond Cutter, or the RKO, as you know it nowadays. So when Giant Baba died in 1999, it was Misawa who got the position as the company president. There's a lot of controversy, a lot of heat, so to speak, and he was removed from his position. Misawa and Kabashi and a couple other guys left All Japan and formed Noah. Noah being the biblical story of Noah. So I guess in Misawa's eye, All Japan is the world is getting flooded, and he's gonna take these wrestlers and whatever, they're gonna be saved, I guess. Although Noah was really good, to the point where Misawa had taken 24 out of 26 contacted wrestlers from All Japan to Noah. So All Japan really had to rebuild at this point. So I think that's when they brought in like Stan Hansen as their authority figure and what have you.
Stan Hansen.
Yeah, Stan Hansen. big star over in All Japan. In the 2000s, they get like the Morishimas, Marufujis. Those guys are really good. And then Kenta, who you would know as Tommy here in NXT. He was a big star for them in the early 2000s. And then something really interesting happened. In 2002, Keiji Muto, also known as the Great Muta, had jumped ship and went to All Japan, which is a big deal. You know how big the Great Muta was in Japan, and especially in New Japan. He went over to All Japan and took a couple guys with him, and then became the president and owner of All Japan Pro Wrestling. So again, All Japan kind of reinvented itself, and Muta brought a different style, and that stuff was really good for a while. When stuff started to go down once again, it was sold to a bunch of other people. So it was purchased by a IT company called Seed Partners, who bought it from Muta for 200 million yen. And then they got some other stars or what have you that quit Noah. This is when it gets kind of really weird, and it gets like they're shrinking. Probably at one point it was the #1 promotion in Japan, the biggest promotion in Japan, and it starts to shrink. It's been shrinking for a while up to this point. Then you had another exodus where Muta would create the Wrestle One promotion, and they take a bunch of stars with them, and then there we go again. Now All Japan has to rebuild. So ever since then, and that was 2013, they've been rebuilding. At this point, they're probably the size of a Ring of Honor. I guess you would call a super indie right now. Even looking at the champions, I don't know who any of them are. They have Onita. Onita's back. Let's see Onita there. But currently, looking at their current roster, there's names I know. Taioki, Omori, Onita, obviously. What I don't see is any Gaijin wrestlers currently on the roster. Ultimo Dragon's there now, too. So we saw this once, juggernaut. And you see it kind of reduced now to, a large independent promotion. They're still making money. This is successful. They've been around forever. They have TV again. So they're not going anywhere, but it's just strange to see it from its heights now to what it is now. And it kind of reminds me of probably what would have happened to WCW. If Bischoff and his partners would have bought WCW in 2001, WCW probably would never be as big as it was, but it would still be around. It would be much smaller. It probably would be like a Ring of Honor or the size of a TNA today. But it's too bad that that All Japan, with all their history and all their great matches, are kind of have fallen to the wayside quite a bit, especially with the explosion of New Japan Pro Wrestling, which is by far probably the largest promotion in Japan. And I think All Japan was hurt by all of these smaller companies kind of splintering off of them. Like you have your Noahs, you have your Wrestle Ones, you have these smaller companies that are offshoots of All Japan. That it kind of hurt them. So there's so many promotions in Japan. Japan's pretty hot too right now. Although I think the UK is probably the hottest place in the world for wrestling right now. But Japan's still up there, especially now that you're seeing Japanese wrestlers on WWE TV with Nakamura and Asuka and Atami and all these guys coming over, and even American guys who went over in the New Japan kind of reinvented themselves and were able to come back to WWE, like a Luke Gallows. It's nice to see. It's nice to see that Japanese wrestling is still around and still a prominent force in Japan. They take it super serious over there. Again, it's still covered in newspapers like it's a sport. So
that's cool.
So Matt, what are your thoughts on All Japan Pro Wrestling?
Well, again, I think the tradition that's there, like you said, when Muta jumped.
Oh, such a big deal.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it. I mean, I always think back when I was just the late 70s or early 80s. I don't think they did it in the 80s, but they used to have like Harley Race versus Bob Backlund or Nick Bockwinkel versus Bob Backlund, those type.
They would get the best matches. They would get the best matches over there. That's a credit to the Funks who were booking at the time. You would see like Dusty Rhodes versus Baba, and you would see Dick Murdoch versus Bruiser Brody.
Yeah, and what's from a writing standpoint, the script I wrote about wrestling, there's just an angle, if you want to call it that, where two guys who were friends growing in the business together went to different promotions, and they're like rivals at, kind of like NWA and WWE was. And they go to Japan and basically have a handshake deal, and they wrestle against each other anyways. And it's a big scandal, but like they kind of show like how traditional and things were, but also at the same time, if you have a chance to make a buck,
you gotta take it.
Right.
You know. It goes back to a lot of people will give me shit for having Inoki on the All Japan show, but I'll tell you this: when we do the New Japan show, you're gonna see Bob on the New Japan show. That's gonna be coming in a couple of weeks. I think getting work together would have been big business over in Japan. People forget that Baba and Inoki were like they were a tag team, and they were the two biggest stars. That's your Rock and your Austin at the time, or your Hogan and your Savage. That's why Inoki was able to go split off his own group, and that's why Bob was able to split off his own group. So you forget how big of a star is in that. Although here in the States, in the first part of the 80s, we saw more All Japan than New Japan. The WWF had nixed their deal with New Japan, so you weren't seeing them over in the States. But you would see randomly Giant Baba show up for the Jim Crockett Memorial Cup tournament for no reason, and he'd be around. Portland would use Japanese footage quite a bit. I saw some from Florida with Jack Briscoe over in Japan. So, as an American wrestling fan watching wrestling in the 80s, you're probably more familiar with All Japan. When it got to the early 90s, when I really, I started watching wrestling in 87, I saw a hell of a lot more of New Japan. And New Japan was on WCW and all this other shit. We got to be familiar with Jushin Liger, even Inoki, and a Great Muta more than some of the stars. Kabashi didn't wrestle for WCW or WWF, you know what I mean? Yeah. Same thing with Masawa. So there's a hell of a, look it up on YouTube. There's a great Masawa versus Bret Hart match when Masawa was still Tiger Mask. Oh, yeah, that's another big thing I forgot to mention. So in 1983, when the original Tiger Mask chose to quit wrestling, All Japan bought the rights to Tiger Mask and then put Masawa in the Tiger Mask outfit.
Wow.
Throughout the 80s, from 83 on, Tiger Mask was a property of the All Japan Pro Wrestling promotion instead of the New Japan Pro Wrestling promotion. All based on a comic book and a cartoon, just like Jushin Liger. So what do you think about Japanese wrestling and the way they use their junior heavyweights? Because their junior heavyweights, they keep them pretty siloed for the most part. They don't really interact with their heavyweights. Yeah. But they're presented as just being junior heavyweight champion is just as big as being a heavyweight champion.
Yeah, I look at it a lot like you have featherweight and heavyweight in boxing. No one sits there and says, well, they talk about a dream matchup, Mike Tyson versus Merriweather, or whatever, but they don't belittle either one. The other day, a guy at work was saying, oh, do you think Conor McGregor will go to WWE? And I was like, well, maybe, but if he goes to 205, I couldn't see him going into the heavyweights.
Yeah.
He's just another big guy. But again, I think that what happens is, for years, you had WWE belittling size.
Yeah.
So
to an extent, they still do that now. I mean, all that bullshit they did with the Cruiserweight championship, or the stuff they did with the light heavyweight championship. Then they have Jackie win it at one point, and then out on the Hurricane forever, and they really kind of shit on that belt. Where WCW, to their credit, really made that belt for a while mean something with the guys like Guerrero and Dean Malenko and Chris Jericho. It got kind of weird towards the end, but that was WCW in general towards the end.
I think one of the problems now is with the current, Cruiserweight, Brian Kendrick. I like him as as a competitor, but I think they need to do more to get him over instead of just these little snippets.
He dropped the belt, by the way.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Who is it? Swan?
Rich Swann. Yep.
So maybe he'll be somebody a little more charismatic. I think you have to have someone who really stands out. I think T.J. Perkins wasn't bad, but you need someone who can kind of promo. It's funny, I get to that thing where I'm doing the wrestling project up here, and I've been working on some ideas. And one thing I want to really communicate to the kids is that, wrestling, for all the skill in the ring it takes, comes down to compelling, if you're compelling or not. Because how many times have you seen a match where they're doing great moves, but you don't give a shit about the finish? You're like, okay, like anybody can do a moonsault if you're trained. Anybody can do an arm drag. But to go out there and cut a 15-minute, or even better, a 3-minute promo that leaves you wanting more is the way to do it.
Let me ask you a question. They have Austin Aries down now. Austin Aries, as you know, hell of a promo, carries himself like a star, can do it all in the ring. Would you put him in the Cruiserweight division, knowing that you probably have plans from the heavyweight division later on down the road?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good way to go about that is to put guys who are legit. Because I think what happens right now is people look at this and go, okay, 205 Classic, but who in that list of people are somebody I'm familiar with ahead of time?
Yeah.
They're almost, I think all of them are relatively new, except for Brian Kendrick. And even that was like, what, 10 years ago?
Yeah, he's been off the radar for quite a bit.
Yeah, like, if they had someone
you know who they need? They need Ricochet. That's the guy.
Yeah?
He's still in contract for another year, from what I understand, though.
Oh.
But they need Ricochet, because I think he's going to be the next biggest star. I mean, if this was a year ago, I would have put like AJ Styles in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because what is AJ currently weigh? He's not. He's probably like 197.
Yeah.
He's actually 218. So cruiserweight he is not.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you can lose 10 pounds though.
Right.
But you think AJ is above the cruiserweight division?
I think he is. And well, it depends. I mean,
like he's the best wrestler in the world.
Right. If he wanted to sit there and say, like, this would draw our attention. Okay. Here's how you build that belt up. If you really want AJ to build the belt up, you have AJ show up at 205 and say, guess what? I want him to diet. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah. I'm gonna, I'll tell you what. I'll put my belt against yours.
Or you want to do something crazy? You have a catch weight.
Have what?
A catch weight, like they do in boxing.
What's that?
A catch weight is in between weight. So when someone's coming down from, like, say, I don't know the weight classes, but say someone is at 205 and you have someone who's at 220, they have a catch weight at 215.
Okay.
They do it I think they do it in boxing quite a bit. It's like, no, you'll go up 5 pounds, I go down 5 pounds. We'll meet in the middle.
Yeah, okay. So I just think if you want to make a really big, bold move, have him come in and have him have a competitive match and like go to a draw, like a 20-minute draw. And have it be that you kind of give a rub, but AJ as a heel could be pissed that he didn't win.
It's a hell of an idea.
And then you say, okay, tell you what, let's do it again, but no exhibition. Your belt, my belt, both on the line. Now this time, he wins it. I would put it over, again, I'm a fan of like putting heels over clean, because I think if you always have them cheat, then they lose their credibility.
Yes.
Have him being double champion. Now, he's doing 2 shows, 2 matches, and if one of those guys beats him for it, that's a really huge thing, because then they can say, oh my God. And then AJ can say, well, you know what? You got your title back, but I'm not going to give you a heavyweight title. You're not heavyweight.
You got the game weight.
Right. And that could be one way, heel.
So if you look at the roster, you put AJ in the ring with any of these guys, it's going to be fucking 5 stars.
Right.
Like there's definitely potential for that. I
do think if you want to really make a point, give him 30 minutes. Like have him do a really good match as a draw. And I always think back when I was a kid, one of the matches that made me want to get into wrestling was I think it was NWA main event. It was Barry Windham versus Ric Flair, and they wrestled to a draw.
Was that the one where it was like the only match on the show? They went straight through? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I remember like watching the whole match and being like, holy shit, that was awesome. And it made me want to wrestle, I remember working with my friend in the backyard, working on the Barry Windham, I call it the Barry Windham Bridge, where you roll over and then bridge up by both lifting yourself up.
But yeah, I like them to kind of elevate this Cruiserweight Championship. Again, that's going to be hard to do because they have not shown the ability to elevate any of their championship belts. So,
right.
Why would they try to elevate their Cruiserweight at this point?
I think the last belt that got elevated was when Cena had the U.S. belt.
They tried, but then they took all the steam off of it anyway. It wasn't sustained. So it's like, ooh. They do it for a second. Like The Miz was doing it with the IC belt, and they took the belt off of him and put it on Ziggler. And it kind of plateaued there, and he has the belt now again. But yeah, they're not putting any emphasis on their belts. I mean, they have Sasha and Charlotte trading back the women's champion. Charlotte just dropped it back to Sasha on Monday. I don't know if that's good or a bad thing. It just shows how competitive they are that they're just trading the belt back and forth, which I guess is cool. But guys, I don't think you're going to see the 2-year-long title reigns anymore. I don't think that's going to be a thing going forward. So And I'm not even sure it should be a thing going forward. I'm not sure. Length of a title reign doesn't really mean anything. It's going to be what the title reign meant to the promotion overall and what it meant to the wrestler. But, you know, lengths. Do I say drop the belt in 3 days? No, don't drop the fucking belt in 3 days. But, 4 to 5 months, I think that's all you really need for a good title reign at this point. It's just because it's so different. I was just watching Superstars from 1988. Actually, Superstars from 1989. And what I noticed on a couple of these shows is that nothing happened on any of these shows. They had 6 matches and 1 promo by Zeus and Randy Savage promoting the no-hold-barred steel cage match that was going to take place the day after Christmas.
Yeah.
And that was the only thing going on in the entire show. So now these wrestling shows, that something always got to happen. They always got to move the angles forward and what have you, that, you're not going to have someone hold the belt for 4 years. This is not going to happen unless you're New Day for some reason.
Yeah.
Although I do think that Demolition should screw them on the day before they break the record. But, Demolition has heat, so.
I still say the one to break is Honky Tonk Man's, only because it'll help elevate somebody. Like, I always look at Randy Savage. He really, owned that IC title reign.
Right. He was supposed to win it twice, too. But let's take a look at the Intercontinental of all time.
Because back when Santino Marella was going to do the comedy break the record thing, that was the whole
deal. Technically, it's not the same belt, because the Intercontinental Championship currently is unified with the WWE Championship. Technically.
No, really?
What we have now is the WWE Intercontinental Championship. Technically. No, you're right. Honky Tonk Man was 454. So, yeah, the Honky Tonk Man is the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion, 454 days. Number 2 is Pedro Morales at 425, which that's what I was debating if Pedro held it for a longer period of time. And Randy Savage, 414. So he held it for a while as well.
Yeah.
But it won't be the reign itself. It's going to have to be like, you can quietly have the belt forever and no one gives a shit about it. You know what I mean? And you can get beat on TV all the time and not lose the belt, and that's fine. But it's going to have to elevate somebody with the Intercontinental Championship. But
I think the problem, for instance, the idea I always had, and actually when I first applied to WWE, one of the stories I submitted for an idea is how long ago it was. Santino Marella had won the belt, and they were doing the whole honky tonk tracker.
Yeah, the honkometer.
Right, and he had Beth Phoenix as his valet. And my concept was that you would have him start off as a comedy wrestler. And over the span of that 400 some odd days, you would have him go from getting, escaping, and then someone would, she would always stand in for him, help him out. Then she would get hurt, and he would rally and try to help her and become, kind of like the old, Rocky train in the dungeon, whatever.
Yeah.
And become tough and become a fan favorite. And the idea was, early on, I had established a point where you'd have him losing to some wrestler all the time. Like, the guy kept destroying him, but he wouldn't beat him for the belt, whatever, but he'd luck out. And then that wrestler was, of course, spin around, was now a heel time later. But I think if you use that time frame as the journey point, if you will, as opposed to he's at the belt, and it's the same thing, like Dolph Ziggler has had some good promos the last few months.
Yeah.
Because he, kind of started showing some growth or talking about his history. Whereas you do the same thing, I'm the guy, it's like, show them, some growth and change.
It goes back to my point is sometimes these guys winning the heavyweight championship is the worst thing that can happen to them.
Yeah.
For example, Sheamus, Jack Swagger, Dolph Ziggler, Alberto Del Rio. And we want to take it way back. We go Tommy Rich, which is the worst thing, and I'll explain to you why. And Tommy Rich beat Harley Race for the belt back in the day. I think it was 1981. Yeah, 1981. So when Tommy Rich won the NWA championship in 1981, the fans were they're super stoked. Tommy Rich won the championship. He's my man, and this is in Georgia. And the fact that he only held the fucking belt for 4 days killed him. It fucking killed him.
Yeah.
Tommy was never the same after that. Tommy wasn't there was a point in 1980, 1981 that Tommy Rich was the most popular wrestler in the fucking world.
Yeah.
After he had that 4-day fucking title run, he was no longer the most, because they've seen it. He made it there, but he was only able to last 4 days as champion. And he's never got even close to the belt ever again. You know what I mean? So it hurt him. It killed him. You know, you can say the same thing for Jack Swagger. They put the belt on him, and they did nothing with him with the belt. So his title run didn't mean shit. Same thing with Sheamus. They put the belt on Sheamus, didn't mean shit. Alberto Del Rio put the belt on him, didn't mean shit. So guys get a kind of a stank on them that, like, oh, they had these shitty title reigns, and now they don't mean anything. They weren't able to bounce back.
Right.
Jack Swagger's opening match now? Sheamus is in a mid-card tag team with Cesaro. Del Rio's out of the company. You know, the same thing happened to, you know, Dolph Ziggler won the belt and one of the greatest moments, you know, the day after WrestleMania.
Yep.
And they didn't do dick with him. So his title run doesn't mean anything. You know, he made zero impact. So it's like, it's all about making impacts when you win these championships. Again, it's not none of these guys' faults. I think Swagger and Sheamus, they were too early in their careers. Dolph Ziggler, they should have done more with him. If you're going to give him the belt, let him be the guy. Let him be the guy.
Yeah.
No. It's like, you're the guy, but you're not really the guy. And that's shit. So, you know, well, we talk about it in, you know, on the iWar Network Facebook page, right? Yeah. If anyone wants to join, I'll leave a link in the description. But we talk about guys who deserve runs with the championship belt. And I always preface that conversation was like, when are you giving these guys the belts? So a lot of people, you know, Kurt Hennig's names always come up. Ted DiBiase, Jake Roberts, Rick Rude.
Right.
Those are names that always come up. At what point are you putting those guys over Hogan? Or Savage? Or even Warrior? Now, would you say that Kurt Hennig's career is a hell of a lot better than Dolph Ziggler's career? Heavyweight champion? Yes.
Yeah.
Same goes for Rude. Same goes for DiBiase. Same goes for Piper. These guys never won World Heavyweight Championships. Hennig did in the AWA, but according to the iWar Network Facebook page, the AWA does not count.
What?
Yeah. It doesn't count. So I'd rather be a legendary upper mid-card wrestler than someone who's won the world championship and it didn't mean dick. You know what I mean? So, like, I don't think they can repair. I think Dolph Ziggler's probably at his highest point. This is going to be his zenith for him. I don't think they can push him any further than he is right now.
Yeah. And
that's sad to say because he's super talented. And, you know, he needs to go somewhere else and come back. He needs to go over to Japan or Ring of Honor and do something over there. And
I think if he went... And I think they missed the boat on this. A lot of guys feel like, well, it's the only show in town. We've seen guys go overseas, recreate themselves, and come back. You know, it can work.
I don't think he's ever wrestled anywhere else. Like I know he didn't do any independence as... Yeah. He is a WWE creation from the beginning. So he's, you know, he was in OVW for a while, and then he came up through the OVW system. But yeah, he's someone who desperately needs to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
But he's 36 years old.
Is he really?
Yeah. He's been in WWE he's been in WWE since 2004. So 12 years.
Wow.
You know, he's one of those guys. He was like a Jerry Briscoe. Like, oh, I saw you at the NCAA tournament. I'm going to sign you to the WWE. When they used to do that. And, you know, he did a great job. You know, he became a professional wrestler. And a really good one. But they've never done anything with him. And he really, like, he can do, like, if he went over to Ring of Honor, he would definitely give them, like, a boost. If he went over to even a TNA, they're still around, he would give them a boost. If he went over to Japan, he would give them a boost. But I don't think he's any interest in even leaving at this point. I think he's pretty much like, oh, I'm just going to be in the WWE for 20 years and retire. And I like him, too. It's sad. But what are you going to do? So I did want to take some time out to talk about, you know, we've been on hiatus for a little bit, and I did want to talk about the Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar match. Now, the match went a minute 25?
Yeah, something like that.
We don't have the guess. We have the internet.
Oh, hey now.
Minute 26. So, Goldberg defeating Brock Lesnar at Survivor Series in 1 minute and 26 seconds after hitting 2 consecutive spears and then delivering a jackhammer, giving Goldberg the win. Now, overall, the Survivor Series pay-per-view I thought was done extremely well. I was really happy about it. I thought they did a good job, all around. Probably one of the better pay-per-views of this year. Hey, listen, I bitch and complain when they do shitty stuff. I have to praise them when they do good stuff, so I think they did a great job with Survivor Series overall. And I thought that they did a good job with this match. Because I know I've mentioned it on this show. You can go back and watch the last episode. And I made this comment that there was no way in hell that Bill Goldberg was taking those Germans from Brock. That shit was not going to go down. So, he didn't. He squashed them, with my little air quotes. He squashed them in 1 minute 26. Probably the best possible booking you can do in this match. Now, I would have not booked the match at all. That's just me. I don't like when they book themselves in the corner. That's what this was. Because what I mean by booking yourself in a corner is when you book something that no matter what the result's going to be, they're going to hate it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they actually found a result that people didn't really fucking shit on. Because if this match went 20 minutes and it was a fucking stinker like WrestleMania 20,
right,
it was going to be shit. Or they would have done a fucking double disqualification or double count out, double knockout. They would have shat on all that.
Yep.
So this is the only possible scenario where it would have went well for them, and so they did it. Reasons why they did it, it could be a lot of different things. They could be building up a Goldberg-Lesnar match for WrestleMania. They could be building up Goldberg to face The Undertaker. They gives them a lot of options with Goldberg, who signed the day of the pay-per-view. Probably is why they had the result the way that they did.
Yeah.
Although, again, I wouldn't have put him, his first match back, I wouldn't put him with Lesnar. I would have put him with Triple H and done the same result. Him beating Triple H in 1 minute 26 seconds at the setup for a Lesnar Goldberg match at WrestleMania was probably what I would have done. Cat's already out of the bag for that one. The horse is out of the barn, so you can't go back and do that. But I thought, overall, I think it gave everyone that feel-good feeling. It gave everyone that what-the-fuck moment, because I'm sitting here watching it, and I'm like, what the fuck? And it was hype, man. It was cool.
Yeah.
So, Matt, what do you think about Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar?
Okay, I think the same thing is, as long as it's building to something else, and I was thinking about it, like you said, if they went 20, 15 minutes and they were like just gassed and terrible.
Brawl to the back bullshit.
Right. But if you had them fight to establish a future, it's almost like what happened with Sami Zayn and the big dude.
Braun Strowman.
Yeah. Braun just destroyed him to set up a future match. Same kind of thing. They're looking out for Sami, I'm looking out for you. But you're setting up that fans want to see the rematch. Now, Brock's pissed. So the one thing I'm worried about is, and I speak as a guy who's never liked Goldberg. I think he's limited. I don't think he's charismatic. I find him boring as shit.
He cut a hell of a promo right before Survivor Series, too.
Yeah, he did. But overall, I just never really dug it. In the past, like the old days, I just never liked him. He did prove all that one promo. But I would do that as a way to set up a future rematch, and that way you have an angry Brock. I know they're both going to be in Royal Rumble, and they're both cutting promos where they're kind of like, I'll
now,
fight.
Did you think that Brock looked out of shape?
A little bit.
I mean, obviously he's not on any performance enhancers, but he looked out of shape to me. I know Goldberg had an injury going into the match, so that's probably another reason why it was so short.
Yep.
But I thought it was really cool. I was like, it was one of like a oh my god moment, like oh my god, like this is happening. I'm like, what? Again, a lot of people are pissed off that like, oh, fucking Brock beat the Undertaker streak for nothing. Not true.
No.
Brock, number one, will always have that. Number two, he's been drawing off of that for the last 2 years at this point.
Right.
So, what are you gonna do? Now, a lot of people out there saying that Lesnar should have jobbed to should have been beaten by a newcomer, someone that can elevate. I don't think there was anyone for them to elevate at this point, unless you were going to bring up a Samoa Joe or Nakamura to do something similar. Nakamura has already beaten Lesnar in Japan anyway. And they can
Oh, did he?
they can bring that up. But it'd be nice. It'd be nice to see. Maybe the Goldberg thing gives you a lot more options because it opens up matches for you. So now you can go back and do a Triple H versus Goldberg match. You can go back and do an Undertaker versus Goldberg match. You can do a John Cena versus Goldberg match. Those are all fresh matchups now.
Mm-hmm.
So having Goldberg win the match gives you more possibilities. Lesnar destroying another guy.
Yeah.
You know, who's going to come in for one match and get beat by Goldberg? I mean, go get beat by Brock. It made no sense. So that's why it was interesting about, kind of why this was happening, because it didn't look like anyone was going to do business. And to Brock's credit, this could be a thing where maybe he's getting a lot of heat in the locker room as someone who doesn't want to do business. He's not going to take a loss, and this is a way to be like, I jobbed the Goldberg. Fuck. You guys can't say shit now. You know what I mean? Because, he had issues with Jericho. Maybe guys didn't want to work with him after the Randy Orton thing, that work-shoot thing.
Yeah.
Which was a work, but it's like, I'm not letting this fucking guy fucking hard way the fuck out of me. Maybe guys didn't want to work with him, so kind of way to be political. You know what I mean? And and get some deals here, all off a video game, by the way, which is interesting. So, this was the big dream matches they're promoting on WWE 2k17.
Yeah.
So that was real interesting where they're getting their inspiration from. Let me ask you a question. This might be it's on topic, but would a Goldberg Stone Cold Steve Austin match draw?
Oh, I think it would for Stone Cold alone.
You think just seeing Stone Cold one last time in the ring, that's going to draw regardless of his opponent?
I just this is the thing with you look what happened to Sting. These guys just pushed it, and then it's like, okay, now they're done. But I always go back to the idea that, look at the Survivor Series. Shane McMahon put himself on the team to do his spot. I'm in the locker room going, that could have been me. Now, granted, who were we talking about that was left on the roster that was going to have been that spot? Maybe not all the your first choice, but something. I always feel like if you have a chance to put a guy in the locker room who's on his way up and put him up and do something good with him, fine. Because otherwise you go, why'd you put a guy who's been out of wrestling for whatever many years as the main event? What about the young guys trying to work their way up? And that's part of the reasons I think you have the young guys who feel like they're stuck on a treadmill. So when Vince says, grab that brass ring, dude, you're not even putting the ring out for us to grab. You're keeping me off the show. So I can see some heat out of that way.
And the bottom line is, like, these guys are not, the guys are currently in the rosters, and there's guys that I really, really love, but they're just not as over as guys from the past. Not their fault. It's the company's fault, but they're just not. So WWE have to go back and rely on these guys coming back. And there's rumors out there that's going to be an AJ Styles versus Shawn Michaels match coming up shortly. So it's like, you're going to have Shawn Michaels go over.
Right. And another thing, too, it's like, if he beats Shawn Michaels, it's like, well, of course he beats Shawn Michaels. Michaels is like 50 years old.
Right.
Why would he not go over?
I would. The only way you would do that is if you stretch him out. And then you can always, as a heel, you'd be like, I'm the guy that ended Shawn Michaels' career.
Right.
That's the only way you would do it. And there's talk about Undertaker versus AJ Styles. AJ can make anyone look good, and I'm curious to see what kind of shape the Undertaker's in at this point. He's in his 50s at this point, so.
Yeah.
They're going to be running out of these legends soon, so they're going to have to build guys and not.
Well, that's right. You think about it, you go, okay, so in 10 years from now, or 15 years from now, do we have somebody who can bring Dolph Ziggler out for Royal Rumble?
He'd probably be more over.
Well, I know. I'm just thinking, like, who's getting over, and when you watch the guys who are trying to become stars, and you go, okay, like Heath Slater, okay, for example, I think they should drop the belts at this pay-per-view
to Wyatt and Orton.
To Wyatt and Orton, to help continue. They won the Survivor Series. They won their match. Continue that momentum. Put the belts on them. They're solidifying them as a dangerous threat. I would give Randy Orton a wardrobe makeover to make him more.
Needs pants.
He needs a Wyatt-esque type thing. Like he's not fully embracing the Wyatt family so long as he keeps his, old routine. That's my feel. That'd be like during a biker gang and they go, "Here's your jacket." Go, "Nah, I'm good." What do you mean you're good? You wear the colors. Nah, I'm all right.
It's like Bret Hart. Is it Bret Hart not wearing the NWO shirt when he was in the NWO?
Right. So by that theory, have them win, right? So they go on and move forward. Similarly, Heath Slater loses the belts. Now maybe he loses the belts because Rhino turns on him and joins the Wyatt family as like an enforcer. I'm just throwing ideas, nothing major here, right?
It probably has something to do with his mustache.
I shave this mustache for you, Heath, for you. World's worst twist. So you have that whether he turns on him or not, or maybe somehow Heath loses the match, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he won his way into a contract. They did kind of the same thing as Jamie Ellsworth, and have Heath. You've got to have him start having success after this.
Yeah,
because if that's it, he's never going to be anything else ever again. You could have Heath turn on Rhino.
Yeah.
I mean, you just think that. I think if you have the families thing. I got kids. I love that shirt.
Yeah.
It's payday actually today, so I'm like, yeah, can you Christmas shopping? And one of my friends, I want to get him that shirt if I can find it. But I think if you build off it, it can be fine. Whereas just to do things, which again has hurt them for years, because traditionally WWE has just been like, well, whatever, it'll be hot. No, like build on it, and having the Wyatt family win. Have Randy devolve further and further down the spiral,
mm-hmm.
and have them grow. What if the Wyatt family franchised?
Maybe like the Dudley Boys?
Right. Maybe not quite that, but
my biggest thing is bringing in Kevin Sullivan to be Bray's manager. That's just me.
Dad.
It's ridiculous. All right, guys, so we are officially out of time. So for Matt Riley, I'm Alex G.